Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Bryan Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Bryan are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Hello, everyone. Bryan Bibbo here with J.L. Smith, Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We're here for another episode. I got a guest with me, known him for a long time, Chad Weigl. He is a seasoned retirement planning professional, a lead advisor at J.L. Smith. He's been helping clients navigate financial, estate planning, tax planning. For many, many years now, he holds a certified financial fiduciary designation, Series 65, Life and Health. I think you know about a little bit about everything across the board. You've been helping with Medicare. You've learned that aspect of things, Social Security planning, tax planning, estate planning, income planning. But we're really here to talk about today is asset management for high net worth individuals. So Chad, first and foremost, glad you're here. Let's have a good time. We always do, laugh a little bit, and let the audience hear what we want to talk about today. So I just want to break it down. We said we're here to talk about asset management for high net worth individuals and family. What does that actually mean? And how is it different just from managing investments? Do things get more complex as the net worth gets higher? Share with us a little bit about what you work with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely there's a much higher level of complexity there. It's a different mindset. You're going from, the traditional where you're just looking at rates of returns during the accumulation phase, to more looking at, integrating taxes, different types of asset classes. You're also looking at the estate planning side of things and making sure that assets are avoiding things such as estate taxes. So you really are looking at more of a holistic approach, incorporating everything from Social Security to tax planning to asset planning, estate planning, all those different things into one plan that walks and talks as it should.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're sharing here is it's kind of complex, right? More complex, but you have a lot more things that you want to take care of because, legacy planning, multi-generational planning is what you see, especially with maybe business owners that are higher net worth or even individuals that have accumulated a lot of assets over the years. They've had the ability, like, I want this to be multi-generational, right? Mm-hmm. And what have you seen from your experience of this, that it turns to be multi-generational? Is it leaving assets to the family? Maybe what are some options to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah. So when it comes to that, really, when you're sitting down with those higher net worth families, it's really just asking the questions. What are they looking for? Are they looking to leave money for generational wealth? Are they looking to spend the majority of their money during their lifetimes? Are they looking to be charitable in nature? Like, these are all the things you really need to look at and analyze. And unless you ask those types of questions, you're not going to know what their goals and objectives are. And then you're going to build a plan that meets those goals and objectives. So I think that's the most important thing when you're working with those higher net worth individuals who more likely than not will have a pretty substantial amount of money that will be left either to the next generation, to charities, just understanding what their primary focuses are and then working on building that plan out for them.
I love it. So if I wanted to leave money to, let's just say my children or the next generation, what are some good strategies to consider? Maybe tax efficiency here. What if I'm coming in to see you, Chad, and I say, hey, one of my primary goals is I do want to leave a good amount of money to the next generation. What would you start diving in? What are some concepts or things I should start considering?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, we're going to talk about health, because health is an important, measure of what potentially we could set up for the estate planning side. You can leverage money using life insurance potentially. On the other side of things, just making sure that we're doing the right things from Roth conversion planning to managing cost basis to positioning assets in the most tax efficient manner over their lifetime to really get more of their dollars to actually get to those beneficiaries without the higher tax rates that they could potentially inherit. So it's a combination of multiple things that we can do to make sure that they're positioned well to leave that legacy to the next generation.
I heard a really good one in there that the audience might not know, but just to summarize, life insurance, making, if our health is in a good position, maybe we can qualify to use quarters on the dollar
Correct.
to multiply a tax-free benefit. You also said a good one, which is Roth conversion. Everybody thinks Roth conversion is just some, hey, I'm going to do for myself, but it also can affect the surviving spouse or the next generation. But you said this one specifically, and I want you to go into detail, is you said something along managing cost basis, right?
Mhm.
What does that mean? What accounts is that affecting? Give me some detail.
Yeah. So generally, when you're working with higher net worth individuals, they tend to have a lot of what's called post-tax money or non-qualified money. And when you invest that, it is treated at more preferential tax rates from that standpoint. So when I say managing basis, you might be using strategies like a stock managed account, where during the course of the year, they're offsetting losses and gains and actually building up some potential losses. Because sometimes there's other investments out there like real estate and things that an individual might have that they're looking to exit that strategy. And you can use some of those gains and losses to offset the sale of that property or that real estate. So really that cost basis management is important, and making sure that, you're putting them in the best position, down the road by taking advantage of that tax loss harvesting on an annual basis.
Got it. So it's a combination of looking at their taxes. Should I buy something or sell something throughout the year?
Mhm.
Or if I have a huge expense that I incurred because I sold maybe a rental property or I sold my family business, can I offset that with some losses maybe I have in a brokerage or non-qualified account, to your point? And in addition is like, hey, how am I managing that basis? Is there a way that I can start paying tax on the basis to be efficient for, myself or maybe my surviving spouse or something along those ways?
One other thing I would say, especially in regards to post-tax dollars, and a lot of times it's just asset allocation. Like a lot of times individuals will have those post-tax dollars earning some of the worst, money that you can, which is just ordinary income through the use of CDs, money markets. Those are all hitting somebody's tax return, where you could really look at just maybe repositioning those into something that's more tax efficient, like a municipal bond portfolio that gives off tax-free income for individuals. So a lot of it might just be, shifting those assets from one place to another and maybe setting those up as more of a growth asset from that standpoint, and maybe positioning some of the qualified assets, as earning that interest because it's deferred. So a lot of it just depends on the overall makeup of what they saved and what they have, and then building that plan around there.
So you gave us one great snippet there that, like, if I have a CD at the bank and I have $500,000 in that CD and it's giving me a 4% rate of return, it's giving me 20 grand a year, but that hits my tax return every year, right?
Correct.
But if I had that $500,000 in, let's just say, municipal bonds, individual municipal bonds, and say it does the same 4%, that hits my tax return, but it's not taxable, correct?
Correct. I mean, you could run into net investment tax, but it's a minor tax from that standpoint compared
You're
to
still
ordinary
saving
income.
greatly overall.
Correct.
If you're in a 24, 37% tax bracket, wherever you fall there. So I love that idea. We also talked about so far, one that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. I come in to see Chad and I say, you know what? I don't have any children. Something that's near and dear to my heart is more charitable planning. I know there's donor advised funds out there, charitable lead trust, those kind of things. If you can speak to like a little bit of the charitable aspect of things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times there might be some larger qualified accounts. I mean, and people are giving significant portions to charities. I mean, you can use qualified charitable distributions, where essentially the money goes directly from an IRA, to the charity of choice. And that's a tax-free distribution from their IRA that doesn't hit their tax return. And it also, is going to that charity tax-free. You can use donor advised funds, where you can use post-tax money and get a large deduction off of your taxes by donating that. It could be highly appreciated stock. It could just be cash, but there is a donation for that. You do have to donate it to charity, but you can also let those assets grow. It doesn't mean that they need to be donated in that year. They could be donated over the next 10 years. So really it allows you to kind of front load those deductions for tax purposes and be able to really, distribute those funds out when you're ready to.
Got it. So if I, one of the things you said is like, if I bought Apple stock X amount of years ago and I put 10 grand into it, it's worth 100 grand now, I have a gain of 90 grand. But if I put that in a donor advised fund, do I owe the tax on putting it in there?
No, you do not.
So that's a benefit. And then I think the concept was I get a tax deduction all in 1 year, assuming I have the income to support the deduction. And then the next thing down the line there that we think of, I don't have to give all that money to charity all in 1 year.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe you give $10,000 a year to a specific charity and you put a highly appreciated stock in there and it was worth $100,000. You can still let it sit in that position and grow, and you can donate the $10,000 each year for the next 10 years and then reload that donor advised fund.
You see working with high net worth individuals is probably higher budgets or lifestyle, right? Income that we need. And in a lot of cases, that fair to say that?
It's fair to say.
Okay, that's what I figured. And, then the average American that's out there. But how do you balance this? Like, if I need $150,000 a year to live off, let's just pick a number. After tax, I need $150,000 a year. How do I do growth versus preservation versus liquidity needs? In addition, leaving something for the next generation, maybe charities included. How does the bucket plan kind of help with this and balance this all into one holistic financial plan?
Yeah, I mean, it first starts off with the now bucket and just making sure that, we have enough in there for those emergency events and any major planned expenses. You're not really wanting to take too much risk. You're still going to get a little bit of growth on that at the bank, but you want to keep that baseline in there. And then what we do is we set up a soon bucket. So that soon bucket is really meant to be the first phase of retirement. It's really to be more conservatively in nature, but you still want to be growth oriented on those assets. Your goal is to grow those assets. But by setting up those conservative assets in the soon bucket, what it does is it allows our later bucket and everything that's left there that we can be a little bit more aggressive on that, because we've now set up enough in their soon bucket to meet their income needs for an extended period of time, if not permanently, depending on the strategy that you go with for that soon bucket. But it allows you to position your other assets and be able to deal with the volatility that you're going to incur as you move through retirement.
I love it. So when I think about the bucket plan, is tax planning across all the buckets? Is it in one certain bucket? Like, where does tax planning fall into this bucket plan? Like, when I'm setting up the soon buckets, should I be going, hey, it's a portion of these assets, it's a portion of these assets? Speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, really, you have to look at the overall assets that are out there. Sometimes people have the three worlds of assets. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're working to get those three worlds of assets. But really, it could be a major...
Stop a second. What is the three world of assets? Hit me with this. What do you mean by a free world of assets? People want to know. I stopped you because I know someone out there is thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So IRA, 401ks, those are qualified funds.
So pre-tax
dollars, and when you take money out of those, it's ordinary income. Then there's post-tax dollars, which are taxed a little bit more efficiently. Those are like our brokerage accounts, our trust, those kind of things. When we take assets out of those, we're taxed at preferential tax rates, as long as we defer the investment for 1 year. So you generally are at 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your income level. And then there's tax-free assets, which would be like Roth IRAs, HSAs, those kind of things. Having those three worlds of assets allows you to do when you're building out somebody's plan is really to control those tax brackets. So by using a mixture of those, you could potentially pay a much lower overall tax rates when you build that plan out.
I love it. So in my soon bucket, I may have some non-qualified money, some IRA money, some Roth money, just depending on what's going on.
Sure.
Maybe my goal is to go on the Affordable Care Act, because they don't ask you, hey, you have a few $1 million. They don't ask that question. They ask you what your income will be for the year. So you can structure maybe Roth money in the soon bucket for a few years to get me to age 65.
Correct.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. So what I'm hearing is, like, we talked about the soon bucket, but how can tax management or taxes play into the later bucket when you think of maybe there's a surviving spouse at play? Let's start there. Let's start with the surviving spouse. How do we plan the later bucket maybe to take care of a surviving spouse?
Yeah, and that comes to like the later bucket's philosophy of legacy. It's not necessarily just for the kids, but also our surviving spouse. Because if we lose one of the two of the individuals, what's going to happen? The tax brackets are going to get cut in half. You're going to hit those brackets a lot faster. So you do definitely want to be doing that tax planning in that later bucket. because that's going to potentially be the money that we're harvesting later on in retirement. And you want it to be the most tax efficient for that individual so that we still have that control mechanism for those brackets.
Got it. Yeah, a real example is, Chad, I was working with a client today, and it was about 4.5 million. Saved it all in one of your worlds. You know what I mean? It was all pre-tax dollars.
Yep.
And it got to the point of the conversation of like, how do we make this more tax? They're not going to spend through all the money, right? It is going to be multi-generational. We got into the conversation of like, hey, what can we be doing here? Chances are they probably don't qualify for life insurance just based off some prior health complications. So we got in the conversation of doing the Roth conversions in the later bucket, because the reality of things, and what I'm getting at here, is when we forecasted the required minimum distribution on that amount of money and some growth, they were in their mid-60s, just to give you some context. It was going to be $180,000 to $220,000 a year. Then you have Social Security on top of that, so on and so forth. It's like, wow, I'm easily at a 24% tax bracket in today's tax brackets, but that could be 28 or 30% in the future if the tax rates end up going higher here in the future. So that's kind of a real life example. And what we started talking about was, let's start spending some of that IRA money down in the soon bucket to fill the income gap, and also do Roth conversions each given year of some things. And then charity plays into it also. That was more the conversation. So it's spot on to what you're saying. I just had that conversation this morning. So taxes obviously are a huge part of this. But let's go into kind of the legacy and estate planning goals are just as important. I need that 150 grand a year, right? But how do I balance that in my lifestyle today while ensuring I take care of the future generations?
Yeah, with the legacy planning, I mean, we've hit on it earlier. You know, the life insurance is that pennies on the dollar mindset. That's one way, that you can ensure that legacy. On top of that, we need to make sure that we have the proper legal documentation in place. I mean, that's critical. I mean, especially in states that have a state tax. And when you're dealing with higher net worth, you might potentially even run into, the federal estate tax. So you've got to be making sure that the proper legal is in place and you're going to preserve those thresholds within the estate tax code so that you're not getting hit with the top tax rates going to the next generation. As far as kind of structuring that balance, it's really just looking at hammering down, how much money do we have? What is our projected returns on those? Again, those are hypothetical, but, if we structure the plan and put more conservative outlays on what those assets are grow to, we can really come down to, we're in a good spot at building that baseline income of the 150. We have a strong growth in the later bucket that is going to support that, future generation, or we've used life insurance to leverage that.
You brought up a gap that we run into a lot, and the public doesn't realize this. You said estate tax, not the federal tax we would owe, or the federal tax our beneficiaries would owe. This is a whole separate tax. And we know it's like 13 million plus as the time of this recording. But what people don't realize, in certain states, there's also a state tax also.
Correct.
Yeah. So I know we work in multiple states, and like Washington is an example here. It's $2 million plus. If the estate is over that, we're paying state estate tax on that too. Ohio currently doesn't have one, but you're running into this all the time of like, people need to be aware. So what are some thoughts when it comes to estate tax? I know we talked about the life insurance, but what are some other things maybe we can do? And I know you're not a lawyer, but there's irrevocable trust out there, those kind of things. So
yeah, I mean, I actually just ran into this and have been having this conversation. So I have a client I'm working with, his parents are in Illinois, and it comes down to properly structuring trusts. So to preserve for the state estate tax exemption. So from that standpoint, in the state of Illinois, it's a $4 million threshold. Anything over that runs into estate tax. It goes all the way up to a potential 16%, depending on how much your estate goes over.
And that's just the state of Illinois.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can structure a marital trust with a family trust, and essentially you have up into the Illinois estate tax maximum for the one spouse go into the family trust. The remainder would go into the marital trust. And then once that individual passes away and those trusts have been set up, You've preserved that $4 million for the one spouse of avoidance. The remaining assets go to the surviving spouse through the marital trust. If their assets go over and above that 4 million, you could run into some, but you're making sure that you're preserving the maximum amount you can.
But what you're really saying is have a legal team to help
Correct.
along the way. We're financial advisors. That's not legal advice, but he's kind of giving you, Chad was giving us the details of like, how do these things work? It gets more and more complex, especially if we live in states that there are actual estate tax. And we heard it here, like 16% is what we would owe in state tax. And if we have a federal estate tax, it can be as high as 37%.
Correct.
Which is a lot. Now, a lot of individuals have the assets spread across the board, right? You run into trusts, maybe that are previously established or need to be established, business interest, real estate, such as maybe rental properties or apartment complexes. And we talked a lot about the investment accounts. Now, how do we coordinate all these moving parts into one cohesive asset management strategy? Are we looking at like, hey, this real estate's a certain, it's bringing in income, or it's not bringing in income, it's a second home? Give us some context.
Yeah, I mean, you're really looking at all the various accounts that are out there. You're structuring a plan around those. So, like, if you have business income coming in, and it might be passive business income because you've exited the business and somebody's taken over, that's going to go into developing that budget. As far as investments, how are your investments structured? What kind of income are they getting off? At the end of the day, this all comes back to the tax return. And making sure that you understand how those assets are hitting the tax return and what the potential tax is in regards to that. So you really have to understand, what the incomes are, where they're coming from, how they're taxed. And it all comes down to understanding how to read a tax return, how to understand a tax return to come up with the best strategy for those assets.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of combination of figuring out where they go into the buckets and going from there.
Yeah.
But a lot of, if I come in and I have a business I'm actively working on, I should say, excuse me, and I want to sell it in the next 5 years, would you include that asset possibly in the soon bucket then?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you're looking to be exiting in the next 10 years, I mean, that would be more of a soon bucket item. Now, the proceeds from that sale, a portion of it may go into the soon bucket, depending on what your income needs, and a portion may be kicked out into the later bucket for long-term growth. So it really depends on the overall scenario, but generally it would fall into the soon bucket for the start, and then you would move a portion out to the later bucket once you've established what they need for income.
Got it. And then probably same thing with real estate, right?
Absolutely.
If I own like an apartment complex that's selling, those kind of things, secondary home, all of that. Next thing down the line here is risk, right? And right now we're experiencing market volatility. It's always going on. The larger the stock market gets, the bigger the fluctuations are going to get. How do we manage that risk, which positioning their portfolios to kind of capture opportunities for growth? So let's start here. Market takes a hit. What are you considering doing?
Buying more. I mean, getting back into the market. I mean, most people, commonly philosophy would say, hey, I the market's going down, I want out. But, my recommendation would be, hey, we should be putting money into the market. We're buying in at a discount, or we should potentially be taking on a little bit more risk since things have come down. And then when we rebound, we'll rebound much better.
I keep 10 grand in my bank account, Chad, but I have this net worth of $5 million. How do I buy more into the market then? Like what are some examples?
Yeah. So, I mean, you may have a cash value life insurance policy that's out there, and it's got a significant amount of cash value. That's a very conservative asset that gets consistent growth. You could look at taking a loan from that life insurance policy and injecting it into a brokerage account and really capitalizing on that rebound. And then once the markets have rebound, yes, there's some interest that has to be paid within, the life insurance policy, but you just simply pay back the loan and take the profits, going forward outside.
I like that. And I like that as an example, but what about, I maybe have some bonds or some CDs, and if the market's down enough, does it make sense to do something there?
It depends on, what those assets are earmarked for, but, potentially you have a conversation around it like you do with any individual. Like, what is the purpose of these assets? yes, there is an opportunity here, but does this opportunity make sense in your scenario? Like if you have a major remodel that's going to cost you $100,000, I'm not going to tell you because the market's down. So I mean, it really depends on what those are earmarked for. If they're just more conservative in nature, but not being used in the very immediate future, you could utilize those if the client is comfortable with it as an opportunity.
I like it. I think the other thing there is like if I'm in the later bucket, maybe I have a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% of bonds. Market takes a 20% hit. Depending on your risk tolerance, does it make sense to throw some of those bonds in at that time or rebalance the portfolio, right? Because if the stocks are down 20%, you're not in a 60-40 model.
Correct.
In addition, as we always say this, and I want everyone to hear this, is that if the market takes a hit, an inter-year correction is 10 to 15% on average. If we get a bigger hit than that or we're there, it might make sense to convert to a Roth at that time or reset some of the basis, as you explained to us greatly before, on some of those non-qualified accounts. So that could be a way of like, hey, how do we take advantage of opportunities that the market does bring to us? There's always going to be tax planning and everything else. And we speak of the ultra wealthy, the very, worth hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars. Anytime something like this happens, they're always moving and planning. Hiding under your desk is usually one of the worst things you can do.
Oh, absolutely.
No doubt about it. So for high network investors already working with financial advisors, what questions should they be asking to make sure their strategy supports their lifestyle, goals, and legacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think before you even start to develop a plan, you have to understand the individual situation. You got to walk through and really ask all the questions about them, their family, their concerns, their goals. What are their long-term objectives? Are they charitably inclined? All these types of questions need to be addressed even before you start to develop that plan for them. And once you have that understanding, now you can start to mold that plan and really have it come to life from that standpoint.
Chad, compared to, the big box firms, financial firms of the world, and they work with higher net worth individuals also, what makes you different than them?
Yeah, it's that holistic approach. It's looking at those taxes. It's looking at Social Security planning, Medicare planning, estate planning, all those things that go into it, insurance, managed money. All those things go into that plan. Like if you're not working with somebody that has a holistic approach that looks at all those areas, are you really getting the best plan?
Yeah. You also brought one up that we haven't even talked about. I want to touch base on is like health insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does health insurance work? Let's say I'm pre-Medicare or post-Medicare after 65 years of age. How does this Medicare work for us? What does it look like? Am I paying more for certain things?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, the pre-Medicare, which is pre-65, if an individual retires at that time, I mean, really, there's a couple options. You could go get underwritten. You could go to the marketplace, also known as ACA coverage. But what you're going to run into is the costs are relatively high. I mean, there's some ability to control if you have certain types of monies out there. But if you're at a higher tax bracket, there's more likely than not, you're going to be paying a pretty high premium. Depending on how many people you're insuring, those kind of things, your age, you could be at, $1,200 to $1,800 a month just in premium. Deductibles range. Generally, the deductible before you even start to get any coverage is $15,000. It's like right in that ballpark. And then you have max out of pockets of up to 18. So if you had something major occur pre-65, you could be on the hook. Well, just to start, maybe 20 grand just in premium.
We just heard about that.
And then you might have another 20 grand in out-of-pocket expense. That's expensive if you're running into that on an annual basis pre-65.
Yeah, so planning properly. And then if I'm on Medicare, when it hits my tax return affects the Medicare, right?
Oh, 100%. Where you fall as far as your tax bracket has a major impact on what you pay for your Medicare and your prescription drug coverage. So when you're doing that tax planning, depending on the individual you're working with and where they're at, I mean, you could look at that. That is an additional tax. It's called IRMA. But, depending on what their overlay and assets that they have out there, sometimes it makes sense to pay that extra tax because down the road, it's going to put them in a much better overall tax scenario. And they're going to get to keep more of their money and their family would get to keep more of that money.
Yeah. So I love all the concepts you shared with us today, and you really gave us a clear picture. I'm sure you're just scratching the surface with what you do every day and how you help these individuals. So that's amazing. And I think you nailed it with saying everything needs to be coordinated, right? If you're going to one place to get one advice, you go to another place to get some other advice, you're probably not seeing the whole picture. And maybe those people aren't coordinated together where, Chad and your team offer that expertise at JL Smith. So that's amazing. Very blessed to have you on today. I always ask everyone, and I don't know if you know this is coming, but if you have one message to leave to the world, whether it be financial, family oriented, or anything else, what is that message?
Save early and save a lot.
That's coming at us with the financial aspect. We had Kelly and Jeff on here previously, and they came up with some great philosophical thing. And you're just saying, save early, save often, and guess what? Pass it on to the next generation too. Let them hear that message. That's so important because you know what? I've learned this over the years. The people that win the lottery, how come they lose it? Because they don't have the principles of saving the money.
Correct.
If you have the principles of saving the money and you start saving early, you're going to be able to hold on to that money. Hey, thanks for everyone listening, viewing this podcast. We'll talk to you on the next one. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. JL Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through JL Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.